we speaking with? Could you introduce yourself?
I am Marianna Wright. I'm the Executive Director of the National Butterfly Center.
And how is the Butterfly Center involved within pipelines and all of that? What is the correlation? What is the relationship there?
We are here on the banks of the Rio Grande River in the Rio Grande Valley. We were one of the first locations named and funded in March of 2018 under the Consolidated Appropriations Act for border wall construction. 9 months before that, though, I found government contractors on our land. They were cutting down our trees, mowing down brush, widening our road, which is a private dirt road on private property. But the contractors were there. These were TikiGak, an Alaska National Corporation with ties to...
So they had come across on your land, destroying the trees without any kind of authorization, let alone even the permits and...
Correct. No legal proceeding, no other permission, no notice. It was surprise, and they did it covertly. They did not check in or announce that they were here or doing that. I just happened to discover them one day when I went on our property over the levee. I was headed to the river, and there were 5 workmen there, 3 with chainsaws, one driving a brush hog and one with a brush boom. And this was July 20th, 2017, more than 9 months before any congressional vote or appropriation authorizing border wall. So that kind of kicked off our involvement, our learning, our resistance to all of this. We filed suit against the federal government in December of 2017. But a few months before that, Chief Manuel Padilla, the former chief of the Rio Grande Valley sector of Border Patrol, came to visit me with no appointment, in plain clothes, but to tell me the government did send those contractors. It was for work ahead of the border wall, and they would be back. And when they returned, it would be with green uniform presence. And I asked, what does that mean? Does it mean what I think it means, that you're talking about armed federal agents, either Border Patrol or Army or National Guard, on private property to guard the employees of for-profit corporations as they rape the land, as they do your work? And he basically didn't answer. He just said, people tend to get very upset when we exercise eminent domain to take their land.
Could you explain the significance of where we are with the butterfly location?
Well, we actually anchor this section of the lower Rio Grande Valley Wildlife Conservation Corridor. The corridor is something that the federal government, along with private organizations like Audubon and the Nature Conservancy and the North American Butterfly Association, have been building for the last 50 years or so. And the corridor primarily stretches along the Rio Grande River to preserve and to revegetate this remnant of native habitat, and to provide a corridor for the wildlife and the plants, the native plants that belong in this area, as everything else is destroyed and pushed out for development, for commercial agriculture, for industry and commerce, more international bridges, more way stations for heavy trucks and cold storage facilities, more residential subdivisions and all of that. So the corridor is not continuous. It is described as a string of pearls. Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge is one of those. It's about 2,000 acres. We are another one of those. This is the NABA section for the North American Butterfly Association. It includes our property, 2 National Wildlife Refuge tracts that are federal lands, and Benson Rio Grande Valley State Park. Altogether, we're another 2,000 or so acres. And this 6-mile area that includes some private property for homeowners and La Lomita mission, for example, we were the first contract awarded in a decade for more border wall construction. And that happened in October, November of 2018.
For folks that want more information, what is a website that they could go to?
Well, they can go to nationalbutterflycenter.org or peruse our Facebook page, which is National Butterfly Center. For the last 2 years, we have chronicled our interactions with the government, important stories, legislative acts, and other things with, just the facts. Dates, times, photos, audio recordings, links to journalism that includes documents from the government, FOIA requested things, all that substantiate their plan for the wall. The only thing that is quote unquote speculative is our belief, our gut knowledge that once the land is seized and the wall is built, they will put pipeline in behind it. When you couple the permitting of 3 new LNG terminals at the port of Brownsville, at the Laguna Madre, and you see everything that is happening in, the shale and Del Rio and the pipeline construction, what they are preparing to build is a pipeline from West Texas, either El Paso or Del Rio, that goes straight along the river behind the border wall. So this will be secure, protected infrastructure behind the border wall, guarded by a paramilitary police force, now protected by House Bill 3557, which criminalizes dissent and free speech. And I spoke at a landscape management conference at Texas Tech University about 2 months ago. And when I showed those professionals the plans for the border wall and the associated infrastructure, including the lights every 50 meters and all of that, those professionals exclaimed, "Looks like you're getting pipeline." And then at the border security conference this past week, a graduate student from the University of North Carolina who does work with the oil and gas companies affirmed other things that we've heard. So we know President Trump was here in April and signed 2 executive orders. One, authorizing the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to close all of the loopholes that currently allow states to protest and delay and hamstring pipeline construction under the protections afforded us by the Clean Water Act. He's trying to shut that down. The other executive order he signed gave sole authority to the President of the United States to permit international pipelines. So these would be pipelines that come from Mexico or go back and forth that are shared with another country, as well as things like Keystone that goes from Canada through America. Those things, coupled with how this infrastructure looks, the House bill, the anti-dissent laws, the permitting of the new terminals, and then the rumors that we continue to hear and have affirmed from other places that AMLO, the president of Mexico, is going to nationalize Pemex again. All of these things only go to support our very strong suspicion, our gut belief that the pipeline will go in behind the border wall. The border wall is nothing more than a preposterous cover for the oil and gas companies to put in pipeline between the Rio Grande River and our canal system and poison our only freshwater source.
What can folks do to support the work that all these various folks are doing to stop this?
All of us need assistance to promote, to get the message out there. We all need funds for traveling, for organizing, for having buses and other things to go to the Capitol, to go to Washington, D.C., for lobbying days. We need money to support the legal efforts, depositions, even investigative journalism. You know, many of the traditional news outlets, the ones with the greatest reach, are operating on skeleton crews, and they want turn and burn stories. They can't afford to have journalists just hanging around working on these deep, long form investigative reports to discover things like whether or not Evraz, the steel company owned by Roman Abramovich, a Russian oligarch that operates in Portland, that makes tubular steel, not only for pipeline, but steel bollards. We already know that Evraz supplied between 30 and 50% of the pipeline for Keystone. Is it also supplying the steel for the border wall? Is this one more instance of the president rewarding Russian oligarchs and his debtors with public infrastructure projects in America? We all need the indigenous networks, our allies, the National Butterfly Center, Earth Justice, Sierra Club, everyone, the ACLU, everyone who is fighting this legally and through direct action. We need funds to continue the work on the ground.
What is going to be the impact on the butterflies with this wall that runs continuously to, as you say, pearls, and this wall chops all of this up?
The first impact, you know, I get a million times a day somebody tells me, you know, butterflies can fly over the wall, birds can fly over the wall. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is less than 5% of our native habitat remains. Our native plants are the host plants for butterflies, the only things that butterflies can lay their eggs on and have their caterpillars grow and complete their life cycle. Every butterfly is tied to one or two host plants, and they're all different. Otherwise, the competition for resources would be unsupportable, unsustainable. So the habitat that we've created and that is primarily in this corridor is what sustains the life cycles of the butterflies. The butterflies, the caterpillars, sustain the birds. Caterpillars are the number one food source for migratory birds. So for every mile of border wall that they are constructing, with the enforcement zone and the rubberized all-weather road and the expansion of the levy road and all of this, for every mile, they are eliminating a minimum of 20 acres of native habitat. And that's not habitat that can grow back. They're pouring concrete and they're rubberized all-weather terrain over it. They're further reducing it with light pollution with these 22-foot tall light poles above the border wall with the all-night blitzkrieg lighting. And you don't have to look far to understand how light pollution affects birds, bees, bats, crepuscular and nocturnal mammals, even plants. So we've got all kinds of bad upon bad compounded, but from the elimination of the habitat to the light pollution to the risk that's posed by having all of this habitat behind the border wall with limited access in the event of things like wildfire. And those happen. We've had them 3 years out of the last 7 that I've been here. And if the fire trucks, if the first responders can't get through, can't rapidly detect and deploy, the loss of habitat will be that much greater.
Once again, we're speaking with
Marianna Wright, Executive Director of the National Butterfly Center at Mission, Texas.
And contact information, website?
Yes, nationalbutterflycenter.org.
And is there anything else you want to leave for the folks?
Just that the border wall is not about national security. It is being built over 2 miles inland in many places. It will not stop people or drugs or weapons from entering this country. They have a 2-mile zone to land on U.S. soil. The only thing the border wall is going to do is create a hurdle for the truly desperate who are not being trafficked. They will sit behind the border wall and get picked up by Border Patrol, where they are sent immediately to a for-profit prison. That costs American taxpayers the detention of tens of thousands of immigrants and asylum seekers, costs us more than they will ever obtain in benefits. You know, the people need to do their research. They need to understand that this whole scheme is theft from Americans, from the coffers of the taxpayers. And when we're paying on average $775 a day for an immigrant to be housed in a for-profit prison per day.
$775 per day.
Per day, and it's
per person.
Per person, and it's more than that for children. It's between $1,200 and $1,300 per day per child. Imagine if our veterans or our senior citizens received an additional $775 a month. Imagine the impact that would make to people's lives. Instead, our legislators are writing policy for profit that goes straight to millionaires and to their shareholders in the military-industrial complex that has no benefit to the people that they hold up and claim to be supporting, like our veterans and the American people.